Hello. Hi. My name is Piotr Pasich, and today I'd like to present you a presentation for the main topic, simplify your code with annotations. But first of all, I want to, of course, thank you for coming and listening my presentation. So really thank you. I appreciate that because it might seem to be a really boring topic, but it isn't, of course. I would like to introduce you to myself as a person, what am I doing here, and what am I doing for a living. I'm the senior software developer in skillful software house Xsolv. We're living and working in Gliwice. It is next to the Katowice in Silesia district in Poland, and mostly we are working and developing enterprise application for huge customers. Our last customer is, in example, Coral from Canada. So I can guess it is really tremendous customer. Okay, so that's about me. We can go through the code about annotations. First of all, we should define what annotation is, describe some kind of a definition, and I found in the internet that it is some kind of metadata description of some objects, some things, some comments inside all documents which we have, not also the code. So, but I can say only that in some point of view and in some way I can disagree with this description because there's something missing. And to describe you what it is, I can tell you some story, because we've got a guy who wearing a tie in our company. Probably is in this room, probably. And once, when I had came to our company, he was trying to write a little stick note with this message: this dishwasher is broken. I said, okay, but you are a huge fan of XML configuration. And he's really freak. Actually, he's really freak of XML configuration. So I asked him to go with me to our meeting room. We call it aquarium, and put this really stick note into the wall, as you do the same in the XML configuration. You move your configuration outside the entity. Our entity is exactly the dishwasher, and move the configuration to another place, to another file, and look what happened. Those stick notes are our configuration in XML, YAML, or some another files which is extended to other directory. That's not perfect solution. And this quote came to me just after this little situation. What can happen if we stick our stick note, this little piece of paper, just in the right place, in the dishwasher? It is much comfortable to read it. Do you agree with me? If you see this little example, this little piece of paper just in dishwasher, you can say directly, this machine is broken. It's fine. With XML, you should go to another directory, to another place, and for looking for your configuration. So the main thing of annotation is that it is just right in place where it should be. So I have begun with the little story because I like stories. I always say that programmers should write some story, tell some story, and all about development is telling the story. So we should write some story, okay? A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was little Mary. Who was our customer? Little Mary wanted to order in our company a blog, and one of things she put in our backlog is exactly to create a post, create, update, read, and delete the post. But only thing is that she's got not human public relations resources department in her company, and she wanted to approve every post which is posted and saved into her blog. So after creating and updating every post on the blog, it should, an administrator, perhaps her, should be notified by email or some another channel. Okay, so we've got the story, backlog, and use case. We're working mostly with update because it is most complicated as far as I know. So we are creating from console bundle, Xsolve SymfonyCon bundle. Also, we are creating the entity, post entity, of course, which has properties like title, content, creation date, update date, and author. For us, we will go through almost all of them because they are important for us to show you how annotations work and how we can simplify our code with annotations. After creating this little entity, we can create the CRUD from CRUD generator inside the Symfony framework bundle, and this is the code which we received from the console. As you see, it's quite complicated in my humble opinion, and we are not the best writers in this place with this code. We can improve it and get even much better in this place. So where can we start? Of course, with routing. When I posted my proposal for this presentation, there was quite old version of Symfony, and probably there wasn't possible to generate automatically from console the root annotation configuration and also the template. This presentation would be much more interesting, but in this case, we have all generated in the top, but at the end there are not. It is not perfect. I can show you why in a few minutes, and we can do it even better. Okay, so root. Why is it important to put the roots in annotations, not in YAML files or other configuration files outside the controller? This is the first slide where I can admit that annotations are not perfect to everything. This is our table of content. I would like to create this table of content in YAML file. Why? Because it will be simple and much better readable. But every chapter, in our case, chapter is defined as an action inside controller, should have own definition. As you see in the top of the slide, we haven't got any title of the chapter. The same situation is when we create action without root. Much more comfortable to read for us is when we put the title on the top. Do you agree? Or you are sleeping now? Okay, fine. You're not. I'm joking, you're smiling. Perfect. Okay, so I'm sorry, I will put down because I don't see my slides and I like walking. Okay, so we've got roots and method. As I said in the beginning, it's not perfect. Why? Because when we analyze the root class, which provides for us annotation, we've got their methods, private methods. We can put the methods inside the root annotation. So we can simplify even the automatically generated code from Symfony core bundle. That's perfect. We can cut one line from our code. I divided it into few because I'd like to present you what can we do more with this kind of annotation. We can add requirements, of course, what we can do also with YAML and XML, but this piece of code is placed just next to the action, so we can read where we are and keep in mind what are we going to do with this action. As you see, we've got exactly the same properties and options which are available in other kind of configuration. Why I'm not put in here specification and or documentation from Symfony, because they are not everything. We cannot read everything for specification. Sometimes it's better to go directly to the annotation class or some other class or object to analyze it and get better knowledge about it. And all examples will be based on exactly class's definition, not on the specification. Of course, you can use specification. Okay, the second thing is template. As I said, it is pre-generated by the bundle, so it's quite simple. But we cannot cut some other lines like in roots. But it's said for us that we are in some landscape, some general view. So we got another options, and I can say that template is of course quite simple for us because we can use it by default in our annotation. But more interesting is the steamable. We can set it on true to force the tweak to show us the template or the layout immediately, not to cache it and show after generating all the content, but immediately part by part, piece by piece with our code. So we will be the HTML code will be received as soon as possible. As I said, our little Mary will be able to create a post, but of course only administration should be able to create a post, so we should secure our application. In few months ago, in last version, I don't remember which exactly, 2.1 or 2.2, we was able to add only JMS annotations from Johannes Schmidt bundles and secure by those annotations. For now, Symfony contributors created their own annotations, security, there was secure as far as I remember, which is pre-built inside the Symfony core, and we can use it to define our security permissions to some action. So we can define has role with role editor for, and only people who has role editor and every role above can edit our post. Edit or create, of course. We can create also some expressions in here to give more permissions for more people. In example, has role and editor or role administrator. But we know that roles inside the Symfony 2 are placed in hierarchy, so we are not going to do that in this place exactly. Sorry. Okay. So we cut it another line, another three lines from our controller, from our action. On the other hand, we've got, of course, our update action, which in first place get our entity directly from the database. This is for maybe 5 lines of not so well written code. We get the entity manager, get the entity from the entity manager, and find if it really exists. It's quite simple, but we can also simplify this piece of code by param converter. And in this place, any questions? Okay. If any, please don't hesitate to bother me. In this place, we can put in here default param converter from doctrine repository, but it is not so interesting for us. I'd like to present you a little example with web services, because in our company we create a lot of applications based on a few or at least more services. In example 5, 6, 7. So sometimes we want to be able to open our action with already created object from web service. And we can, oh, sorry. Okay, so I will come back to this example a little bit later, okay? Okay, so we've got param example options, which we have a name of our value. We have a class of our entity. It's quite simple. And of course, options. Optional is also quite simply to explain. You can put the option param converter in, from the root or not. But options are complicated in our case because we've got a lot of options. We can map, join with our other tables from doctrine, or find by some conditionals. So as you see, we can create directly some post with prepared date and slug from some of our prepared methods in the repository. The find with joins is well-prepared method inside the post repository class. And after that, it is quite simple to use because we put only a post object inside the parameter of the action. As I said, in the example, you can create the web service param converter. So, param converter has a pretty simple interface, only with two methods, which should add and or change the request with your object, replacing ID with your exactly object, or the support method, which returns only true or false if you can use this param converter or not. So we implement this converter. Oh, I'm sorry. We should implement this converter, and we can create the service directly to inject our web service to our converter. So we use the external API to get our entities, not from database, but from other repository. And first of all, Symfony 2 is checking if it is available, if this param convertible is available and supports exactly this kind of parameters. So we should return from our class, from our supports method, the true or false parameter, if it supports our entity or not. you can find the options from configuration. Of course, there is prepared method to do this, and after all, when we are able to use it, we are going to find which object is prepared for our ID. So we call the web service and call the method inside the web service which gets the object by ID as in doctrine, and replace our parameter, in example ID or web service ID or something which can we even imagine, by this object. And of course return true, because we are going to return true. In this example, there is no exceptions, throwing exceptions, but there should be. If no object is found, we should throw new exception with some message. Okay. Fine. Of course, as I said in the beginning, to inject the web service inside in the constructor, we should declare our class web service param converter as a service. We're doing it in here. Why in YAML? Because I decided to do this just before other annotations, and I will show you how to inject parameters or declare services by annotations after a few slides. So we declare our service with is exactly the param converter, and the really valid thing is here, because it is the name of our parameter. When we put this parameter name inside our action, this should be automatically replaced by our object from web service. So, after all, we have this kind of code with the parameter converter, which is automatically converted into the web service object. And it's fine. It's quickly. We cut at least five another lines of code in one action. Okay. In my opinion, another really important thing is validation. I was some time ago on the DDD workshop, and they said us that entity should validate itself, not from the external configuration or external method, but when you put something inside the entity, it should be validated. You should be truly sure that every data which you have inside the entity is correct. So, inside the validation, we can describe our validation with as a short description and tags. We've got two properties in our classes, and it doesn't describe us anything. What is short description? Can anybody say it? Is it some text, long text, short text? How long is it? It is required, or something like that. What is inside tags? We can say that there might be some kind of strings, some kind of other data. Probably there might be also IDs of external tags from other tables inside the database, but we cannot say anything about those two properties in our class. It is much more comfortable to read it with validation inside in our annotations. So now we know the short description is required and should have at least 2 signs and maximum 250. This almost the same situation is with tags, but it is not limited, of course, and at least one option is required inside, And from version 2.3, it is available to declare validation rules inside the array. So we can put those kind of annotations inside our entity or other class to be sure that we have correct data inside our parameters. We are not supposed to check it again after that. We cannot set the tags or short description if it is invalid. Do you want to see how write your own validator inside the Symfony 2? Okay, perfect. It's quite simple. You add on the top of the class annotation, and the rest is the same. You declare the contains class and the constraint class, which handles the checking of validation, and that's all. The only thing which you do with validation is adding the annotation just above. And you use it by preparing the namespace for our is redeclared as SymfonyCon, and you do use it in the same way as with doctrine assets or Symfony 2 annotation. You put your general namespace in here and your annotation validation in the second place. Okay, that's it. That's pretty simple. Update date. So we are moving to the doctrine annotations, and update date is similar case to the creation date. When we updating the post, we should update also its field update date, and we are creating the post. We should update of course the fields creation and update post. But how to do that without putting this little line of code inside the action? Of course, we can handle two actions, pre-persist and pre-update, inside the entity. We can define it by adding for class post has lifecycle blocks to say for our doctrine annotations that doctrine should find some other callbacks inside the entity. And after that, it's quite simple to create one method with annotations which is calling after updating or persisting the post into the database, and there we are going to put our line with updating the dates. If ID is set, we update the update date, and if it isn't, we update creation date. Okay. As you see, we are not going to create some on-kernel request, event listener or something like that, or put this little line inside the code because it is not reusable. We only create another method inside. And when we update our entity from the administration panel or from the API, it will behave in the same way. Notification. Do you remember the story? Why we notify the administrator? Okay. To notify our little Mary about a new post, we should create, of course, the service, because all what we do should be based on services. And I'd like to present really good work of Johannes Schmidt. You can find out this web page with blog. I'm really it's really good lecture to read and really good work. Do you need more time with? these slides will be available in the internet, so you can find me on the LinkedIn also. You can define, first of all, services with annotations. We defined one of examples, service example, few slides ago, with YAML files, with YAML configuration, but now we are able to do with this bundle by annotations. We can declare the service annotation in the top and add some tag to say the Symfony 2 core that it should be called just after the update. Of course, we can just after the doctrine update. Of course, we are able to call those methods or this service after every kind of events available inside the Symfony. So, the second valid thing inside this service in how to inject parameters inside the service, because it is all about the service, how to declare it, how to get it in another service from another service, and how to inject another services inside this one. So we are able to inject params from annotations by little call in the just next to the construct method. Okay. The question for you. In YAML configuration, you create the second configuration for the same class, and you define other parameters inside the construct to change the behavior of the class. In example, you put there, in one case, some post repository from Doctrine, and in another case, you put their API repository, which are communicating with external services. Do you know how to do this with annotations? Because it is that simple. Has somebody an idea? In my opinion, it's better because you have to extend this class with new name and rewrite all those options. Why it is even better than YAML configuration when you have exactly the same classes, but with different behaviors. In this case, you will be pretty sure that your class mail notification service will be communicating with SwiftMailer. If you extend it by another class and call it as KeepChat. Do you know what KeepChat is? Okay, it's quite similar to Skype. So Skype channel. You put in here Skype channel and call the service as Skype notification service. Inside other services, you are pretty sure that if you got the instance of Skype notification service, that it will be communicating with Skype, not with other services. In this case, you are able to inject inside the controller some other services, which are communicating with some external services, and you are not able to check how it behaves in this place. So I believe it's better to know with which exactly classes do we work. Of course, and we've got the post update, which is called after every post. It depends exactly on this parameter, and we unfortunately should check every entity instance to validate to change only this, which should be changed in this place. So in our case, we should check every entity which comes to us from the arguments. That to be sure that it is this is post. Okay. Yes? Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And first of all, it is a pretty bad example to talk about this, but please cut the mail. We are going to create only class notification service without any construct, in first of all. And after that, we are going to extend this notification service by another class, in example, your private mail notification service, and put the same annotations in the same places, but with another parameters, with new parameters, and it will be overwritten. Yes. Mm. Okay. I have no idea. I will examine it, okay? Please contact us and we'll find out. If we will have some solution, we will put in our blog xlab.pl in English, of course, to be in touch with you. Okay, but it is really good question. Okay, performance. Of course, we are not going to say everything about performance, but only those kind of annotations which really matters for us, and we will talk about the show action. And for me, the really important annotation is of course cache. I have done a few projects with Varnish and SE caches with the cache, and I'm really happy to work with this tool. Do you know how to use Varnish and SE? What is it and how it works? The reverse proxy cache. It cut your loading time of the page to 3 milliseconds. It's perfect. But it caches everything what you have in the selected box. So you should be wait for another response, in this case for at least 10 minutes to change the content. But in the most simple way how we can create the cache and force our system to use the Varnish and the SE inside the action after, of course, configuration it inside the Symfony 2 and app.php file is to create this not so pretty piece of code. That's a lot of unnecessary methods which is called from every action, and I don't really like this way how we can force the Symfony to cache our views. So Symfony contributors decided to simplify this piece and create cache annotation. Of course, we've got available all of options which can we see in this piece of code, and we can put all those parameters inside this. Inside the cache annotation, we can find the function which is going through every parameter key by key and looking for some method or public parameter inside the annotation class, which is available exactly for this property. So after that, we got exactly the same result as with the previous code. Conclusion. Before, we had a lot of code. We can find there our security issues, getting entity, of course, with checking if it exists. Sending a notification, which is pretty bad. Redirecting after saving the quote, and of course the template. And it is not fitting to the screen. But after, with the annotations only available for our actions, we can cut to a few lines of the code. And I think it's good, and we can read it pretty fast. We got our chapter, we've got our landscape, our scenario of our story, we've got our object, our hero, and security. Who can read this? It's fast, it's pretty, it's good. Yes?
Why do we need a graded form?
Because it is generated by default from the generator bundle from Symfony Core. I have left the whole code which was generated by this little tool. I wasn't. I couldn't remove any piece of code which is, in my opinion, unnecessary, because as you see, in the beginning we've got the same object and forms generated in this place. So I really wouldn't like to impress you by removing some other piece of code which is not supported by annotation. Yes? Which? Yes? Probably yes. If we decided to create this service with the post, it will be automatically detected by the doctrine. Yes, that's true.
Is there a way to secure the whole controller instead of just a single piece?
We should check the annotation, the secure annotation against that, because there should be prepared some other. There are prepared two kinds of annotations for annotations. We can declare annotation. Yes, I know that's stupid quote, but it is. We can, if we are going to create annotation, we should place an annotation marks just next to the class declaration, and there are two another annotations where we can force the system to use this example, this specific class for classes or to methods inside the classes. And we should check if secure supports all of those and hasn't got declared any of those annotations, or is prepared and designed only for one of those. I don't know, but we can check in repository in GitHub. It's quite simple. So we can check after the presentation, because I didn't configure my Wi-Fi. Sorry. Any other questions? I don't know. I didn't receive, but we can create, of course, our annotations. Do you have any example where we can create annotations exactly for forms, or do you mean the validation annotations?
I just give us a variable keeping us like post.
No, I don't think so at this point, but we of course can create our annotation if we have a time. Yes, indeed we have. Okay, annotation. It will be our annotation, and as I said in your question, in the top, or when we are going to create our own annotation, we should declare in first of all and call for the Symfony Core bundle that this will be our class prepared for annotation. Of course, we can put in here some other options which provides our class only for methods or only for classes. This pretty example totally outside our previous story because we've got the light switcher and we can in the room, inside the room, and we can switch the light. We got only the one option, which is the number of the room or the name of the room. And that's it. Only the annotation, switch light, and the parameter. We can declare, of course, annotation class without any parameters. It is also possible. Of course, we should create some reader for our annotation, some class which should be able to read the parameters inside and do the action. We declare the annotation driver, which is declared inside some external configuration. I will show it in another slide, with some injected parameters. For us it is reader and room light, which is external service, web service. Of course, it is called as an on-kernel request, and it is called just before our controller. And first of all, we should check if our controller is available for our annotation. We've got two available parameters inside our method. We don't use it in our example, but I want to be sure that you will know it is available in this place. And unfortunately, we have to go through this array method by method and check if it is the configuration method or configuration annotation which is prepared exactly for this listener, for this driver. I'm waiting for some pull requests which solve this problem because there is a huge performance problem in this place, because when you got more than 10, 11, 12, 20, 50 annotations called just before the controller, there will be performance problems and troubles. Okay, of course we should check if our configuration is an instance of our previous annotation class, switch light, and after that, if it is, really is, we can call the method inside external service. So to create our own annotation, we should create in first of all the value object of annotation. Maybe some of you can call it as a structure, because it has only the setters and getters methods, and we can of course remove those two methods and declare the parameter room as a public. So it will be treated as a structure, not as a proper class. And after that, we should create our driver, which provides every business logic for our annotation. The last thing is, of course, declare this driver class as a service, because we will need some external repositories, some external classes and services inside. If we are not going to need it, we shouldn't do that. So we create the configuration and call it, tag it as an event listener after the kernel request, just before the controller is called. And that's it. 3 files, 2 files and 1 configuration instance. Inside the controller, we can of course declare the annotation by our way. Thank you. Of course, it is your QA time, so you can ask whatever you want. Yes?
For example, the last diagram explained. No, the last demo. You are passing annotations in every request.
No, only in request where we are declaring the switch light. But if we got much more annotations declared in here, all of them will be called just before the action, method. So we will go about 50 times with the same for each.
The point is, in this example, why don't you, for example, catch? For example, you can pass or your active bundles looking for this annotation, and doing, for example, a text file with controller, and if there is this annotation, you only have to check on a line if the controller namespace have a true in your line, if your annotation is set for this controller.
Mm,
And you can get also the options of your annotation.
I don't understand the whole thing, but this for each will be called in our example only once. Because there is declared only one annotation next to the action.
The point is, you have to check
All
all annotations.
annotations which will be available for your action. Because you, in this parameter, event parameter, you will be able to get all annotations which will called by your action and prepare for your action. When you put in this place much more annotation, the for each will be rounding about 5 much more times. When you put 2 annotations, it will be called 2 times inside the for each.
So the reason was in fact, and it was about catching annotations. Have the other types and annotations, and which is the best option to catch annotation? Because for example, you try there is a bundle sleep for I think it's for sleep the kind annotations like
Yeah. I was reading about it, but not use for this time, so I can check it. Another question?
There was one example with entity, there was asset hold. Why we should use it?
Wait a second. Assert all. I will show you. Okay, there.
I think it's more cool.
Yes, because this is an array, and all asserts will be prepared and called for values for the inside the array. If you put in here only those 2 lines, this tag will be validated as an array, and we are going to validate value by value inside the tags array. It is a new option inside the Symfony 2.3 as far as I remember, so it is new. Other questions? Okay, perfect. So I've got 2 other slides. This question, what about we are arguing every time with new project? Should we create an annotation for breadcrumbs? The one option is to create annotations and put breadcrumbs into these annotations, and the second one is to create some, template system which handles those breadcrumbs, and we declare the breadcrumbs inside the twig files. I want to ask you, which option do you prefer? Which is better for you as a programmer? Tweak, tweak. Tweak, tweak, perfect. Okay, so we can admit that annotations is not designed for everything. Thank you. Of course, I'm available for you after the presentation, and don't hesitate to come to me to talk.